Lord, let the words of my mouth and the thoughts of our hearts bring us closer to you. We each bring our own perspectives to our everyday experiences. We can all hear the same story, and yet, because of our own unique view of the world, we can hear a different message or reach a different conclusion from each other. It's just like when one person hears a story and tells it to someone who then tells it to someone else. And by the time it reaches the fourth person, the story details have changed based on what each person heard and took away from the previous conversation. Scripture is meant to tell us the stories of the life and works of Jesus. Some stories appear in several of the books of the New Testament. However, these stories are told differently based on who originally heard them and who wrote them. But every story, no matter which version, provides us with an opportunity to look deeper into the meaning of the words and into ourselves. Today's gospel is no different. It's important, I think, to understand the perspective of the person who's telling this story. Today's reading is from the book of Mark, which is the shortest of the four canonical Gospels. Scholars believe that Mark heard the story of Jesus from Peter, which is why Mark's writings tend to be simple and succinct. Yet it vividly describes Jesus' ministry, emphasizing more what Jesus did than what he said. Unlike the other Gospel books, Mark does not include Jesus' genealogy or a birth narrative, and it's actually believed that the original writings of Mark did not include a description of the resurrection. However, Mark portrays Jesus as a heroic man of action, a healer, a miracle worker. And what is relevant about Mark is that he reveals Jesus as God's servant, and that Jesus' work was always for a larger purpose. In the book of Mark, Jesus was not just a teacher, but he actively reached into the lives of people and affected their physical and spiritual circumstances. Jesus is presented as our model for how to live our lives through serving others as he did. In today's reading, we're presented with two separate stories. First, Jairus, the leader of the synagogue, approaches and asks him to come and heal his daughter. The second story is of the unnamed woman who has been bleeding uncontrollably for 12 years and was an outcast, but she knew of Jesus' reputation as a healer. The story of Jairus is somewhat typical. Someone hears of Jesus, approaches him face to face to ask for healing. But the story of the unnamed woman is, I think, less common. She almost doesn't want Jesus to see her or to know who she is. And in this story, she has no name. But she cannot keep herself from seeking him out. Hers was a desperate situation. Under Levitical law, a woman who was bleeding was considered unclean, which meant she was unclean not only in her person, but in what she touched as well. Even a married woman would be unable to sleep next to her husband. Whatever she touched would have to be ceremoniously washed and sanctified. So because of this, no one wanted her to touch anything. She was an outcast, and they treated her that way. The law required her to be increasingly cut off from her community. Imagine not being able to receive a hug or kiss her children. Imagine not being able to go or participate in worship. She was condemned to a life of loneliness, pushed aside, ignored. Her physical condition reminded her every day that she was cut off from a normal life. We're told that she sought help from physicians, but she was no better and actually grew worse. Having spent all her financial resources, she was reduced to poverty. Despite her condition and through her faith, she takes a chance to venture out to the crowd to find Jesus. She humbled herself to reach for Jesus. Imagine what she was thinking. If I can only get through this crowd and just touch his robe, he doesn't have to see me. If I can reach him, I can be healed. He is my hope to get my life back on track and to be loved again. And once she secretly touched his robe, her illness was cured. There is so much power in that moment. Even Jesus feels the healing occur. And this outcast, this unnamed woman, became known to Jesus. And as she falls before him, Jesus calls her daughter. And with those words, Jesus lifts her up, and she is no longer an outcast, an unknown. She's recognized as a child of God. He makes the healing complete and sets her free by saying, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." We aren't fortunate enough to have a physical Jesus stand before us so we can touch his robe. But as Christians, we have been charged with being his representative, to walk in his way, to provide for others as he did, with compassion and love and patience and empathy. We could look at this story from the view of the unnamed woman and put ourselves in her place, relating to those times when we have felt alone and needing to reach out to God for help. But I suggest that we put ourselves in the place of Jesus. How many times have we been blind to those that are around us, living our lives in our own reality, ignorant of the suffering of others or of their fears, not realizing that we are the medium by which God is offering to help them? Are we silent when we become aware of injustice? Do we turn off the news when we hear an unpleasant story because it's not about us and we go on with our lives? Or do we say, I can reach out to someone who has no name because I am blessed to bring God's healing grace. I can be the voice for those who can't defend themselves and who need to be protected. Like Jesus, we can impact a person's physical and spiritual need. And Jesus shows us in this story that a person's ask doesn't have to be obvious, and our response does not have to be grandiose. Allowing ourselves to be touched, to show empathy and understanding, listening, or offering a smile is a gift from God. God is using us, asking us to act, to reach out to one another and serve others for a larger purpose, as Jesus did for us. Mother Teresa explained, I think, how to serve others when she said, "Let no one ever come to you without leaving better and happier. Be the living expression of God's kindness. Kindness in your face, kindness in your eyes, kindness in your smile." And I think we can all agree that we all need a little more kindness in this world. Amen.